Hi, and welcome to my video discussion board number 2, which is about the documentary that we watched called God Grew Tired of Us, narrated by Nicole Kidman. So these are the answers to the questions, and for number 1, I know the Lost Boys were a group of 27,000 young men with no parents that left Sudan during the war between the North and South in 1983. The boys were scared that their parents, brothers, sisters were killed, and they did not return due to the fear of death and getting killed. These boys would travel in packs where they had makeshift families that were utilized to take care of each other. Once they were in Ethiopia for 3 years, eventually the government toppled, which caused them to migrate towards Kenya, where the UN built them a refugee camp called Kakuma Camp. Thanks to the documentary, I learned a tremendous amount about our deficiencies as an American culture, as well as the differences within the Dinka culture and their advantages. One thing I learned was that they use music and dance as a way of expressing their emotions. When they would be happy or excited, they would start dancing and chanting in their own language. One example would be towards the end of the documentary when John was meeting with his mom. She was extremely happy and excited, which was an overwhelming mix of emotions, and started hopping up and down, fell, but then got back up and started chanting in their native language. The Lost Boys truly enjoy dancing together and enjoy reggae-ish music. The Lost Boys hold strong family values, having traveled with makeshift families. Their group of Lost Boys has in turn become a strong family, constantly thinking about each other and how they can uplift their family back at Kakuma. They also exemplify this thought by constantly having interviews with the 4 Lost Boys that travel to America, which they spend most of their time reminiscing about their family and how they still think they're alive after the war. The White House, it was a cultural activity back at Kakuma Camp that they had on Black days where they had no food or fire. They held the White House, where they spend time entertaining each other in order to ensure that not everything is black during Black days. Some questions that the Lost Boys had about moving to America were how to use electricity, what is electricity, about bathing, showering, and only having one wife. During the anticipation to their trip to the US, one of them pondered whether bathing is like it is in their homeland, and whether they walk to get the water and use it to bathe themselves from the river. One of the biggest differences between American and Dinka culture is the amount of food available. During the anticipation to leaving America, one of the boys mentions that he is excited to be able to never go to bed hungry because Americans always have food and always eat. Although the Dinka have had many misinterpretations of Americans and American culture, eventually, after spending some time in America, they realize that it's a safe place, while back in Kakuma, their family and friends are in a bad place. A big concurring theme throughout the documentary would have to be how strong a family unit is in the Dinka culture, and their idea is much more widespread of what a family is as compared to American culture. One example, Panther mentions that Americans spend too much time working after being out from 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. working and too little time with their families, which in my opinion is very close to reality. Nobody ever has the same schedules in families. The Lost Boys has had a hard time assimilating to American culture at first, but by the help of the apartment manager and some others, they learn about processed foods, what a refrigerator is, what a trash can is, what potato chips are, how to bathe and shower, the difference between hot and cold water, and eventually they start adapting slowly to American culture. When they arrive to their apartment in Pittsburgh, the apartment manager shows them how to turn on hot or cold water, how to throw trash away, how to open up a bag of chips so that they see that the chips are potatoes that are already cooked. Eventually, they adapt to the culture of the United States by observing how things work, being quiet, and being extremely motivated to send something back to their families and in the Kakuma camp. Most of the Lost Boys end up with 2 jobs, although Daniel joins Job Corps to pay for school and use those tools and acquaintances in their daily lives to understand how things work in America. Some of the community building strategies that the Lost Boys practice within the refugee camps would have to be having parliament and having a leader. The founder of the parliament within the refugee camps later mentions in the movie, after moving to America, that the intention of parliament was so that everyone would come together and talk like a family, as well as hear what each other had to say. Some other community building within the camps was that the White House, which was used to entertain each other and fill the empty void of black days. Some of the community building strategies that the Lost Boys have used into the communities they settled have been to have a reunion and stick with their brothers. An example would be when they had the Michigan reunion of Lost Boys, which made them very happy. Another community building strategy would be the march that they did in order to remember all the people that died during their trip from Sudan and ended in Kenya. They spent a lot of the march teaching and telling their stories to the Americans that decided to participate. They also continue to use their music and dance as a way to continue connecting with their people, and they don't care regarding what other people think. The Lost Boys throughout their time in America feel a very heavy and saddening responsibility for their friends, families that they left behind in their homeland. They reminisce quite a bit about their time there and wish that they could bring their loved ones to share the happiness of being in a safe place. During the part when Panther receives a letter mentioning his family is alive, but has had disease, death, and suffering, he is saddened by it, but it drives him to get 3 jobs and help his family before following any of his aspirations to finish school. Due to the Dinka culture, they feel extremely tied to their friends and family that were left. The 2 main ways that they are trying to help their situation back in their hometown is by having more than one job and sending money back to their homes. Another way that some are choosing to improve their lives are by finishing school, and they eventually have aspirations to open up a school back in the Kakuma camp. They realize how important and crucial education is to a successful path in life. Finally, watching this movie really opened up my eyes to many things I was ignorant to and realized that there is much more going on in the world than what we hear about. It taught me that as Americans, we can be very ignorant and rude towards other cultures. This taught me that having a family is really a crucial component of life, whether it be blood related or not, and without a family unit, it is much harder to succeed in life. Thanks to the motivation that the thought of reuniting with their families, the Lost Boys were able to succeed in their own ways. Also, this has taught me that we are very fortunate to have all the freedoms and liberties that we have thanks to living in a democratic and powerful country. If I was moving to a new country that lacked electricity, I would wonder how the people are and how they would react to someone so different from them like me. I would also ask similar questions as they did regarding bathing, food, electricity. Personally, I would love to be able to immerse myself in a different culture. One of my goals is to be able to volunteer in the Peace Corps, learn about the different culture, their different eating habits, their social habits, and I think that'll help me become a better and an increasingly wholesome person. I believe that learning about other cultures changes your values and would open up my eyes to differences in people that at times feel so significant but matter a lot in the long run. I believe just like the Lost Boys had a hard time adjusting to the eating habits and cleansing habits of oneself, I would have troubles adjusting to not having a warm shower and would find it very difficult to cook from scratch. All in all, this movie really taught me that we take life for granted in the US, and there's so much more to appreciate outside of the world and the basic materialistic items that we value and cherish so much. Thank you guys very much. Have a good night.